I am Victoria L. Burson. This is Leadership on the Go. Leadership is not always preparedness for the unknown, but it is tapping into the unknown prepared. Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Listen, right now, if you can like, tag, and share. I just want to say that in the beginning because this is our season finale and you don't want to miss this. You don't even want your friends missing this. So like, tag, and share. We have an awesome show for you tonight with an awesome person, a guest person that's going to be with us this evening. So again, like, tag, and share. And thank you, Essential Unleashed viewers, for following us and watching our shows for the last 2.5 years. We just are thankful to you. And so we are thankful for you in season 4, in this season finale right now. We've had awesome guests on this show. And so this is our season finale. This is our last show until the fall. And it's going down like 4 flat tires. Are y'all ready? All right, tonight we have the incomparable Dr. Veirdre Jackson. Dr. Veirdre Jackson. Yes, I said it, Dr. Veirdre Jackson. And so tonight it's going to be about living strong, and it'll be centered around informed trauma or trauma, learning how to cultivate and ignite a better version of yourself. Let me read a little bit about her, if you don't mind. Can I do that for you? Yes, I didn't think you would mind. So let's do this. Let me introduce you to her. Dr. Veirdre Jackson is a woman pursuing her purpose, passion, and life's priority to share her belief that all children, and I'm going to add people, deserve the best education available. She is an award-winning author, educator, and entrepreneur who is recognized as a leading educational trainer in trauma-informed practices and cultural competence. She is a veteran educator with over 20 years of experience supporting nonprofit and executive leadership. Through her experiences with systems-based approaches to trauma awareness and competency development and resiliency approach and positive behavior and intervention strategies, she has harnessed her passion for building organizational resilience and personal strength on behalf of youth, families, and educational professionals. She provides training, consulting, and supports for parents, educators, administrators, clinicians, and youth development staff who desire to impact children from the inside out. Dr. Jackson is the CEO and founder of Living Strong Consulting, LLC, and the co-founder of Fresh Fountain of Life Counseling and Wellness. She also serves on the educational executive boards of the Black Women's Educational Alliance and Camp Endeavor. She is a highly sought after keynote speaker and consultant, working with organizations like Lakeside Global Institute as a mentor trainer. Yes, Penn State Extension as an online course developer, Pennsylvania Early Head Start as a classroom and home visiting coach, 0 to 3 as a certified trainer in infant, toddler competencies and the growing brain, and various K through 12 public and charter school districts as an equity and justice consultant and relational coach. Her commitment to leaders and organizational development, yes, is elevated through her John Maxwell Team certification, which allows her to support leaders in sustaining growth and maintaining mission through trainings, mastermind sessions, lunch and learns, and coaching in such topic as Today Matters, Leadership Gold, how to be a real success, becoming a person of influence, the 15 invaluable laws of growth, and more. Her internet radio show. When I tell you it's a wonderful thing, her internet radio show and podcast on Voice America's Empowerment Station, Spotify, iHeartRadio, entitled Living Strong. The flip side of adversity reaches listeners with inspirational, authentic, and practical stories from lived experiences by her guest co-host on how to manage bad experiences. How to manage bad experiences. Hear what I'm saying? To leverage lessons and create gains in areas of relationship, time management, health, mental wellness, and mindset, finances, leadership, and faith. Oh my goodness. Her first book, 16 Principles for Abundant Living, is a foundational guide for women's empowerment. And her 2019 book, which I have a signed copy of it, yes, I do, and video series, Fearless Conversations with a Limitless God, provides insight on addressing the challenges to breaking the cycle of toxic thoughts, yes, that keep women in hiding places. Come on through. Let's welcome Dr. Veirdre Jackson. Come on through, Dr. Veirdre Jackson. Listen, I know I said a mouthful, but it's all you, and I'm so glad that it's all you because, listen, I give honor to those who are doing the work, continue to do the work, right? And so, yes, you're doing a lot. You have done a lot, and you continue to perpetually do a lot. So let's get started with the show. What do you want the people to know about you right now? What are you doing right now?
You know what? First of all, Pastor Victoria, I cannot believe that you read all of it.
Most of it.
So I am humbled. I am humbled by this opportunity. And thank you so much for actually creating space for this conversation. I think it leads right into your initial question, what am I doing? Right now, I am passionately pursuing the opportunity to unpack the intersection between trauma and social justice and equity. And
Yes.
everywhere that I am going, as we are coming out of a collective traumatic experience called the pandemic and social injustice, I have been passionate in helping people understand how we actually can move out of this and create a flip side story that represents our resilience.
Oh wow, that is so powerful, and I love that. I love that. And you said collective experience. Yes, we all have experience, and COVID. And if the truth be told, a lot of us are traumatized by it in one way or another. So I'm glad that you're doing that work. So let's get started because I got a lot of questions for you because I want to get it all in as much as I possibly can. So as it relates to your profession as an expert in this work that you do, which is a lot, but particularly on informed trauma, among other things. How did you get to this place in your life? In essence, let's talk about identity. Who are you? You're like, who is Dr. Veirdre? What do you want the people to know? And how did you get here?
I appreciate that question because I often challenge people to identify their who goals. And in 2022, I actually focused on three specific ones. And one of the very first ones is I am a woman who will challenge others to fiercely pursue their passion as I live my own out loud. So I think of myself as someone who has been through a lot that nearly broke me, but I was able to identify the lies that held me hostage.
Yes.
And now I fiercely challenge anyone in my space that you too can abandon, release, reject lies that are sabotaging you and begin to say yes to everything that God is calling you to do.
I like that. I like it. I like it. OMG. OMG. I can't even write that down fast enough. So thank you for, your who goals and fiercely like getting people to live out their truth, right? So you state that achieving and or approaching cultural competencies, in something that I read, within an organization requires systemic change. So tell us more around what this really means.
So when I talk about systemic change, and it actually isn't just limited to really understanding how to be culturally humble in spaces, being a threat to inequity, or even organizations that want to be able to call themselves trauma informed or to use trauma informed approaches, or even just really talking about resilience. I'm very careful to I actually don't even accept speaking engagements anymore that ask me to come in and talk about self-care. I've gotten to a point where I really am not interested in continuing to send a message of it's just a tip or a tool or a strategy that you
Mm,
can throw at people or throw on people. But it actually has to have a place to live
mm,
within the organization or within your own life routines. So it's not the things that you do in urgency, but it is the things that you do in consistency that create transformation. And so when I'm talking to individuals, when I'm coaching, or when I am guiding, especially administrators, we talk about I can explain to you what this is, but you have to tell me where it's going to live in your system, or else it will just continue to pathologize the issue onto people instead of recognizing what it is that is causing people to continue to feel broken, to continue to feel marginalized. We have to identify what is repeating the issue in the first place, not just continue to throw strategies at people.
oh wow, I love that. I love that. And so you guys heard her. She no longer accepts this whole notion around self-care as just trying to, cover the wound, right? Because that's what I'm hearing, but we have to go deep within and look at consistency as well as competency, right? And so
Yes.
thank you for saying that. So talk to us about your specialty around informed or other kinds of trauma. I mean, like we said, everybody in some way or another has been traumatized by COVID, right? There are some people who don't want to admit it, but we all have been impacted just differently. But talk about this whole notion of informed trauma or other kinds of trauma.
So I think I need to pull apart a couple of things. So when we think about trauma in and of itself, everything we go through does not have to become traumatizing. Just
Mm,
because something is traumatic doesn't mean that it actually has to become traumatizing. I think it's Dr. Bruce Perry that gives the analogy. So trauma is the wound, traumatized is the infection. So
mm,
just because you've been hurt doesn't mean that it's automatically not going to heal. It's when it is unaddressed, when it is allowed to fester. And that's really the heart of what I appreciate being able to unpack with leaders who are trying to support those who are following them, as well as organizations that are trying to serve and support those in the community. Recognizing we are all, it is but by grace that certain things haven't hit certain individuals. So I stress when I'm trying to do relational coaching that it is not just about the program, but it actually is about how you are seeing people and their parallel process of wanting basically the same things that you want. And so if we recognize that we're all in this parallel process, it's an opportunity to look at the behavior and recognize it as a symptom, and understanding that it's a wound that is infected, and it's an opportunity to address the infection and not just say that there's something wrong with the person, but ask what happened and address the infection by being relational, by
Mm.
seeing them, by actually listening for understanding, not just to be heard.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Listen, I'm just going to stay here just a little longer because I love how you have whoever, you said you mentioned Bruce and the ways in which he has framed, trauma being a wound and traumatizing, yes, being the infection. And we have leaders who will be looking at the replay. We have those of us who are in church leadership or organizational leadership, nonprofit leadership, higher ed, whatever the case may be, who are in denial about the trauma or the wound, right? Or even the affection. So I want you to go, give me some examples of what are you talking about wound. I hate to go this elementary, but I think we have to, for the sake of those listeners what is the difference between my wound? I know what the difference is between a wound and an infection, but what is the difference when I'm experiencing it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what
Wow.
is my wound and how does it get infected? Let me say it like that.
Wow, that's a whole book by itself. We could sit here just in this one, sit with this one question for a minute.
I know. I love it.
If we acknowledge that as human beings, our experiences shape us. And in my bio, you highlighted how much time I spend with children, impacting organizations that impact children. And when we recognize from birth, our brain is only 25 to 30% developed at birth. So that means 70 to 75% of the brain architecture is built outside of the womb. So every experience that we are having is literally shaping our brain architecture, our worldview of ourselves, and our view of the world around, how safe we are and how much we belong in the world. So from very early experiences, we become shaped by what's happening to us. When we aren't given space and healthy relationships to process the things that are toxic, and to experience more healthy things, then it changes us. It changes our neurological pathways. It changes our nervous system. It changes our belief system. And when I talk about it becoming an infected wound, without healthy relationships, without people who are willing to say, I see you, and I can look past the behavior, which is actually a survival response. And I know that there is more in you, that you were created with a purpose, on purpose. When we have people, especially leaders, who are willing to look past the symptom and really get at the root and begin to speak truth to the root, it's when a leader has dealt with their own stuff that they are clear enough to be able to see people and begin to see them authentically as they were originally designed to be. When we show up in that way, we can begin to help people rewire the poor circuitry, the infection, to begin to address those scenarios. And I do have to, with integrity, also say, refer them to counseling, therapy, and supports that can professionally address the hurt or the pain that has gone unaddressed. It changes us from the inside out.
Yes. Woo, Lord Jesus, you're right. We could stay on this. I know I have a question later about the brain. I learned from you when I was at a retreat center, and it was the first time I ever heard you. And you talk about this whole notion of multitasking. We'll get that and what the brain is. Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there. Let me keep on with this line of questioning, but we'll get there. Don't let me skip over that. But this is good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And there's a lot, but it needs to be said. And I'm going to watch the replay myself. In your work, you stated that informed care, right? Informed care is an organizational structure and treatment framework that involves understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of trauma. What about in the case of the mass shooting in Buffalo? A lot of churches, a lot of leaders, a lot of people are trying to see how can we be present. Matter of fact, I'm going to be part of a conversation on Tuesday. How can we be present for even Buffalo or even other places that had experienced that kind of trauma, or locally that kind of trauma that led us into a crisis, right? So I guess you kind of know where I'm coming from with that.
Yes, so that's a complex question. But again, it's a necessary question, because when we are not focused on speaking the truth and identifying how systemic inequities are real, and creating opportunity to not be in a place of being afraid, but recognizing that when we are able to see one another, give space for listening, for those who are hurting, for those who have questions, for those who are uncertain, for those who are still fearful, creating space for organizations to listen, but what we call listen spaciously. So it is when I'm doing trainings around trauma-informed approaches or being more trauma sensitive, again, I stress that I don't have a magic wand. So if you're coming in for me to tell you the Google list, where you just Google this and do these groups of things and things will be better, that's not what this is. It really is about how we are with one another on a daily basis. It is showing up in spaces and creating opportunities to have what we call brave conversations. We often hear how we want safe spaces, and we absolutely do. We absolutely want to have safe spaces, spaces without judgment, spaces in which people can feel supported. But in order to get to safe spaces, we have to have brave spaces first. And it's an opportunity for us to have authentic questions where people can begin to talk about the things that are marginalizing groups, that are continuing to perpetuate systemic inequity. I had a whole conversation with a group of leaders across our state in Pennsylvania. And I shared with them a story of how I was the only 5-year-old in a classroom in 1975 and at 1974, and how a traumatic experience shaped who I was. And I had them look around the room in 2022, and I and one other person was a person of color in the room. I was the facilitator, and there was one other participant. I said, this is 2022, and I'm in a room of statewide leaders. We have work to do. We don't have time for people to be afraid to have authentic conversations. And honestly, the system isn't broken. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So we have to be willing to say, what are we going to do differently to change the system that continues to marginalize people? But we have to be brave and be willing to be uncomfortable. I know that was
no, I love it. I love it, because I'm about to ask you something else. So because I've been in settings where it just seems like, okay, here she go again, because I am one who don't mind the hard questions. I don't mind engaging in those things. We have to do it. Like you, I like how you frame it's an opportunity, right? And we have to see opportunities as a way forward and not a threat. And how do you when we're dealing with trauma or ourselves or any kind of talk that you're doing in any area or phase of what you do, how do we get people to have these hard conversations without first of all, without others shaming them for having the conversation? And, because, I've been in the spaces where sometimes there have been marginalized people within that group trying to marginalize others for wanting to ask the hard question that people, get silent or go in. How do we have that? How do we do that?
Well, this is a multi-layered question. It actually goes
I
back
know I keep doing it to you, right?
And it's good because I love, as we prepared for this, I said she has a desire to go in with no fluff. We're not dealing with fluff questions. And I love the tough questions. And so I love how rich your questions literally are. But it takes us back to one of the first initial questions you asked me at the very beginning. When you're in an organization that has developed a culture of recognizing that we are going to create a brave space for people to have tough questions. So it has to be a part of the culture. It is not the quick tip, the Google list, or, the magic wand moment. It is, you have set up a framework for this is how we are with one another. This is not just, oh, you have an issue, so I need to take out this strategy and use this strategy on you. No, this is about how we are with one another. I don't have to know your story to show up authentically and to show up in a space in which I want to understand you, not judge you or make sure I make my point and push my agenda. I want to create a space in which every time you talk to me, you feel as though you're actually being heard. And we fail as human beings to actually listen. We very seldom listen. There are more times than not that we are talking or we're listening, waiting for you to stop so I can make my point. And in those places, people don't feel seen. They don't feel valued and they don't feel heard. And so when we coach organizations, that is our mantra. We are coming in as relational coaches to set up a culture that is safe, valued, and heard. Now, strategic, specific ways of doing that. We initially, before you ever engage in the first brave conversation, you establish what is your definition of equity? What is your equity statement as an organization? And you have to have language and messaging around that. So when we recognize where we are coming from, this is the place that we're starting, this is our foundation, then we create ground rules or group agreements on how we are going to be when we have brave conversations. So that when someone steps outside of the group agreements, it's okay for someone else to say, as I'm listening to you, I feel as though you're stepping outside of how we have agreed we're going to be with one another. So I'll give you a moment to pause so that we can regroup and come back into a space so that we can make sure that each other is being heard. So you create a framework. We don't just throw people into a room because they don't feel safe. So it's an opportunity to create a framework, be clear in what we are calling equity, and then practice actually listening. I'm listening to understand, not to push my agenda forward.
Ooh, Dr. V, you messing me up over here. I'm telling you, and you messing people up who's watching. We got some comments coming on here. Listen, if any of you have any questions, even though I'm asking a lot of questions, this is our season finale. Come on with it. She can handle it. I'm telling you, she's a bad woman. And so I'm glad, you know what I like about everything you said is what I hear is this whole, the language around safe spaces. We use that a lot. I think we overly use it, because we hope every space is really safe. But I like how you frame brave spaces. That speaks volume. Safe spaces versus brave spaces, because brave spaces bring more opportunity to listen, to engage. So I like how you frame that. I never heard that before. I'm quite sure it's out there. I'm probably just slow, but I love it.
So Dr. Britt Hawthorne shared that terminology, and it really provides us with the opportunity to recognize that we're going to do work together, to learn and to grow together. It's not just that we're going to be together, but we're coming in here to be brave. So we're intentionally entering into this space to do our work.
Yes, I already know that there's a part 2 coming to this. I'm just saying, season 5, we're just gonna have to, because this is awesome. Thank you so much for that. That is, a very, very good explanation and ways in which you framed equity and brave spaces. I love it. I love it. I love it. So let me ask this. How can we, I put myself in that, as leaders, as people, humanity, if you will, serve more as detectives of our own self-awareness around trauma or around informed care? How can we as leaders or people serve more as detectives of our own work that we need to do, right? You get what I'm trying to ask?
I absolutely do. And again, it's such a rich question. It's such a rich question because I have been in organizations, and I'm sure some of your listeners have as well, that the leader is still dealing with unprocessed trauma, and they are re-traumatizing the people who are following them. As leaders, we have a responsibility to develop, to pay attention to, and to deal with the things that are showing up in our body as well as our thought life. And it is only a leader who is doing the work on themselves first that can begin to fully lean in and to support others without creating re-traumatizing scenarios that people are continuing to get triggered and cannot move forward through. So we as leaders must be willing to pay attention to our self-talk, to be willing to pause. There's a quote, and I'm not going to say it correctly, but I will paraphrase it.
Absolutely.
When I do sessions around leadership development, there's a quote in one of the sessions that talks about there is more power in a leader who will pause and think over speaking. And so in that, there is a power that when a leader will pause and actually identify what is going on inside of them. It is, and I know we're going to talk about it in a moment, but multitasking, being on the grind, trying to find this elusive balance that doesn't actually exist, and trying to create this hustle mentality is all a lie that actually sabotages leaders from becoming intentional about taking care of themselves from the inside out so that they can show up in spaces and be discerning, being clear, being able to pause as an example for others to learn how to pause and become more attuned to what they're supposed to be doing with integrity.
You all up in my alley. I tell you, I just love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And you said something about, I can't think what you said verbatim, but this whole notion as leaders or as people, but particularly in leadership, how we always talking about, I just need to find balance. I need to find balance. I need to find balance. And it was Dr. Teresa Smallwood, who's been on my shows a couple of times, who really, really nailed it on the hit the nail on the head when she said we cannot find. It is ludicrous to try to find balance, right? Because finding balance means you have to give everybody equal parts of yourself, and you cannot do that. You can't give your church, you can't give your spouse or your loved one, you can't give your family, you can't give your job. Everybody can't have 20% of you or 15% of you. But this whole notion of finding harmony, and that's what you were alluding to, is this whole notion of finding harmony. And if some of those things get left off because you weren't able to get to it, be okay, right? And so that's what you were saying in a nutshell, I think.
Absolutely. When I love the concept of harmony, we're actually talking about that on my show in June.
Oh, wow.
For the whole month of June, we're talking about harmony versus hustle. And because it is this whole notion that, just as you said, Dr. Smallwood said, it is insanity to believe that you can be equally attuned, attentive, serving, and supportive in every area of your life. It's recognizing how will you identify what is the greatest priority for this moment to move your purpose forward so that you are able to be most effective and add value in this season. And understand that in another season, something else will move to the forefront. But we can't do things in integrity when we are exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah, you are so right. So thank you so much for that. This is so exciting for me, and I'm loving it. So how can we better manage our responses to trauma? I think you alluded to it and answered it earlier, but I kind of just want to kind of frame that question right there. How can we better respond, manage our responses to trauma?
So first, I have to, in any conversation around trauma, recognize that we cannot necessarily heal everything by ourselves. So it's recognizing when what you are dealing with is beyond your individual control and management. And without shaming yourself, without stigmatizing yourself, recognize when it is time to get professional help. Because we cannot, some of us have been through things that have laid dormant since we were children.
Yes.
And there are holes in our belief system of our value, of our identity that still need to be addressed. But because it has been laying dormant for so long, getting access to it, you may need a guide.
Yeah.
You may need a guide to get there, and that's okay. So I always have to say that first. But when you are talking about recognizing how I'm showing up in spaces, I feel like it's an opportunity for us to unpack the understanding that trauma is not just cognitive. Trauma is trapped in our nervous system. It is trapped in our body. And you will feel responses or triggers to situations sensorily through your sight, through a sound, through a smell. It will send a sensory response through your body, and you will feel it in your body before the emotion shows up. And so if we're talking about becoming more attuned to how we are managing our responses, it's beginning to be willing to recognize what is the signal that my body is telling me before I begin to pop off and lose it. Stop ignoring it. Actually acknowledge it. There's a short acronym called SNAC, that I have used in trainings. And the first is S, so stop. But by the sheer statement of stop, it means that you can start again. So pause, be willing to stop, and then identify how can you start again. In that restarting, notice what it is that is happening in and around you. So take notice of it and then acknowledge if you're tired, if you're hungry, if someone's words have continued to send a certain response. Acknowledge what is happening. What is that trigger? Am I exhausted? Have I tried to burn the candle at both ends and I'm so exhausted that I cannot manage my emotions any longer? Acknowledge it. C is get curious about what you need in the moment. Be willing to ask yourself, how am I feeling and what do I need? And then hey, be kind to yourself, mistakes and all. Offer yourself grace. Get into a pattern of paying attention to the small signals before they become a holler.
Listen, y'all. Pay attention to the small signals before they become a holler. Now, what did you say the N was? I was trying to sit here and write copious notes.
The N is notice. Notice what is happening in you and around you. Remember, trauma is in our senses. Trauma is sensory based. So notice what's happening in your body on a sensory level. Is your neck hot? Is your stomach hurting? Do you feel a pounding in your temples? To pay attention and notice, how is your body responding? What's happening in you? And then notice what's happening around you. How are you reacting? And then acknowledge what's going on. Acknowledge. Yes. I am tired. I haven't eaten. I've been working 12 hours a day for 10 days in a row. Like, acknowledge the thing. That's where that hustle and that grind piece has to be. We have to put our stomp it out, because it's acknowledging what is the issue. Am I continuing to give audience to someone who should no longer be allowed to be in my space? Acknowledge it. And then get curious about what you need to make the change.
And see, that's a big one.
Yourself. Yeah, get curious.
That's a big one. Having to let people go. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means where you go and you can't take everyone. And if it's causing trauma in your life, or, some kind of informed trauma or similar or sensory wise, you gotta, pay attention. And sometimes we don't want to do that hard work. I've had to do that a couple of times, and it was hard. It was hard. The person wasn't bad. The people weren't bad, but it was time for me to let go some things, because I think that is a part of self-care, is letting go. Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
I so agree. And if I could just pause in what you just said around that it's not necessarily that the person is bad. And I think this is where the value of understanding trauma-informed approaches is really powerful, especially when I'm coaching individuals, or I'm in a classroom with teachers, or I'm supporting leaders. It's recognizing that we are all on different steps of growth. And just because I'm on this step of understanding or the step of action, and someone else is in the basement, doesn't mean that they're mad. But if I begin to recognize that we are all in different places, then I don't have to take offense and personalize someone else's behavior. I can say, you know what, they're on a different step than I am. And it's
Right.
okay. And if they don't want to become more aware, it's okay. But I'm not going to keep going into the basement and try and bring them out. I've got stuff to do.
Mm, you're right about that. This is so good. This is so good. Thank you for taking time out to even talk about that. So, what are some of the ways we can step out of everything you talked about, informed trauma and informed care, and ways in which we should do that, particularly around this acronym of SNACK? I love that. I'll be using it again. I'll give you credit. I know you gave somebody else credit, the real person, but I'm going to give you credit for it once. And then, and that's it. But what are some of the ways that we can step out of these hiding places of shaming, and guilt or guilting, um, or as it relates to informed care, or ways in which we take care of ourselves, the ways in which we censor. How do we get out of this? You talked about something earlier about self-stigmatizing, right? And so how do we stop doing that or allowing people to do that to us?
I think first, identify the lie
I
and
like it.
call it a lie. Call it a lie. Call it what it is. Identify what the lie is. What is it that you continue to repeat that was never your purpose, was not actually a part of your design, but somebody else put that thing on you. We adopted it, and now you're trying to carry a lie forward. Identify the lie, and
Yes.
then identify the truth. Depending on if you are a person of faith or not, identify the truth and then write out and spend time speaking the truth. And as a person of faith, I go to scripture and I replace the lie with scripture. It's identifying what is the truth and continue to repeat it. When we understand or think about, as I shared earlier, our earliest experiences create the neurological wiring to our brain. So, in order to create a new response, we have to rewire our current circuitry. So, that's going to be creating new process and new systems for responding to the lie by writing out the truth and repeating that consistently. Every time that lie shows up that came from someone else, you speak out loud the truth to replace it. So it's recognizing that I have to rewire my system, my response. And then when we talk about system building, I love the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about how we actually don't I want to get the quote right. We don't um I'm going to think of it. I'm going to share it in a moment. But he unpacks the power of habits. Ah,
Mm,
we don't um fall to our we don't rise to our goals. We fall to our lowest level of systems or habits. So when
mm,
we're trying to change something and all we're focused on is a goal, is a goal, is a goal, we don't rise to our goals. We fall to our habits or our systems. So if we're in the process of rewriting our systems, it's looking at the lie and then beginning to address our habits. What are the habitual responses you have when that lie shows up? And I stress we have a bi-monthly group called Girlfriend Gatherings. And I stress with them to start with just one habit that you are going to go deep into and change it.
mm.
Dress just one habit that when this shows up, you are shifting your response and building a new routine around shifting that habit. Address the lie and address the habits.
You know what? I like that. I like address the lie. Address the lie that you said to yourself or others have said to you, right? And then what was the second one?
Change the habit.
Change the habits. I just want to make sure. So I'm just going to get straight to that question because you're leading me there. You're leading me there with this whole notion. Talk to us, to be rewired, right? To reimagine and rethink how to do that. We first got to address this whole notion that you spoke about when I saw you at a retreat. This whole notion about multitasking, right? I got to get there because we can't rewire if we don't change that. And you talked about how the brain can only handle two things. I think it was safety and something else. I don't remember the other one. That was a while. It was last year, but I know one was safety. And in order to rewire and rewrite the lie and change the habit, before we can get to changing the habit, in my opinion, we got to get to understanding what the brain can house that is causing the trauma, right? And so can you talk a little bit more about that? You know what I'm speaking of, right?
Yes, I do. Exactly.
Yes, I love it. Come on, share it with everybody else.
So I think we have to, again, understand that every human being is seeking two things: safety and connection. And if we think about the collective traumatic experience we have had globally, those are two things that we have lost in a variety of ways. And so as we think about the fact that that's what the brain, at its very foundation, it is trying to find in relationships, in environments, in settings, is safety and connection. So if you go back to your question about leaders, if you are focused on creating spaces that you've done the work in being brave, and you are specifically identifying how can we serve people in safety and connection, the brain is looking for that. And it will seek it out in straight ways or crooked ways. So, but it's seeking it out. And crooked ways can look like bad habits. It can look like addiction. It can look like all types of things, but it's still trying to get to safety and connection. So at a very foundational level, that's what our brains are hungry for. And so when we're trying to get into spaces of feeling like we want to accomplish something, we want to feel more valued, or we want to recognize that we have purpose, or that we're making some kind of impact or connecting with others, we're seeking safety and connection. But sometimes we try to overload our brains and our bodies by trying to take on too much. And instead of sabotaging our system, acknowledge that everyone's brain has a limited capacity for how much it can take in. We do. There's a limited amount of information, action that the brain can take at any one given amount of time. So when you're trying to do 3 and 4 things at one time, something is not being addressed with integrity. Now, I believe at the retreat, I gave one of the examples of if you start an email and you're writing the email and your phone bings and you look at the phone, you're like, oh, I need to address that. And you pick up and then another notification of a Facebook post, somebody liked your post. You're like, oh, somebody liked my post. I wonder what they said. They go in and I look at the like, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I needed to call so and so. And then you sit down, you made the phone call, and then you sit back down at the computer. You do not start from where you stopped that email. You go all the way back to the top and reread that email all over again, because there is a cost that comes with each one of those changes. When you left the email to go to the notification of the phone, and then you went to the Facebook, and then you made the call, there was a cost that happened with each one of those. And so you now have lost time with that email because now you've got to go all the way back to the top, reread that email, and then try to figure out, what was I talking about? What was I going to say? There's a cost. So we're not being more productive. Where we are there's a change cost with each transaction.
And with that change cost, doesn't that cause, I think for me, let me speak for me, because I'm guilty of all of that. So I'll say that. And you would think that I've learned from the retreat, but I'm still working on me. So when we do that, doesn't that kind of cause trauma? Like, for instance, anxiety, right? And then if I'm already, like, I deal with anxiety, but I kind of like I exasperate the anxiety because I'm trying to multitask and I'm trying to rethink and having to restart every single time I'm disrupted in something I was already doing, because the brain is not finding connection and the brain is not finding safety.
No, when we're popping from one thing to the other, that's a habit issue, right? So it's identifying that I actually want to be focused and give this thing my full attention. It actually goes back again. I love how each one of your questions is layered on what we just talked about before. So in order to be more attuned as a leader, to be more focused in what I'm doing, to listen and really become present in spaces with people, I must begin to rewire the habits that has me popping and disconnected. In order, that doesn't just happen. Being more present, when we recognize, this is a point we didn't make earlier, that's important. When we are in a moment of being triggered, it's actually not about that moment you're in. When you're being triggered, you're either responding to something that happened in your past, or you're fearing something in the future, but you are not in the current moment. And what multitasking does is it robs you of being fully in the current moment. So just as you asked before, what can we do to begin to better manage or maintain healthy responses in trauma-sensitive awareness of ourselves? It's practicing being present. It's getting present in the moment. But if we are a culture that's always grinding and hustling, and we're in a space where we cannot continue to allow ourselves to be disconnected, we have to be willing to pay attention and get present. Get present. I love how we have been able to unpack each layer of this process, to understand that you do have the power to be present. We have the power of metacognition. All of our brains allow us to think about what we're thinking about. Hey.
I like that you raised the conversation about metacognition, thinking about what we're thinking about, right? And many times, of course, when you're talking about being in the present, that's a very important factor to consider. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that helps us to be in the present?
So metacognition actually goes back to that acronym of SNAC, because SNAC is just a cute way of doing metacognition. So it's pausing in the moment. I love how God has actually created our brains for us to be able to pause and say, what am I thinking about? Why am I responding this way? Why does this thing continue to bring this memory or thought up? But the action of being present, or the skill or the habit of being present and being willing to ask ourselves the harder question allows us to open the door to healing. And that's what metacognition is. We pause and begin to get present in our own bodies and our own thought life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for carrying this on. I heard some thundering and then it hit my internet. And so I am glad that you guys were carry on. And so thank you, Elder Dorothy Harris, for taking us out there and further. So, we're going to wind this up because I can go on and on and on. And I know a storm is it was supposed to have passed, but I guess it's coming back through. And so just real quick, because we're going to have you on in season 5, we have to have you back to talk more about this. This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Let's talk about what makes you tick as a professional, and we're going to get into you now, right? So what makes you tick? What do you spend your mental energy thinking about?
Well, I would say that I spend my mental energy thinking about how I can add value. I have moved away from running after platforms, really thinking about purpose in this context of this external thing that I've got to chase down and find. I'm really in a space of focusing on how can I add value with the thing that is already in my hand right now. And in every space, to be able to be love and light in spaces, and create a significant moment.
I love it. Create a significant moment and then not chasing platforms. I wish everyone out there can hear that, who needs to hear that. We don't have to chase platforms. They will come to us. One of my mentors said a long time ago, ministry or even your business should never, ever chase money. Money will follow it. Right. And so thank you for saying that. So talk to us about what greatness looks like and feels like for you as you continue to evolve into the state of greatness that you are. What adjustments do you need to make in your environment and world around you when you talk about worldview?
Wow. So greatness. I think it has, over time, I have really tried to continue to be very comfortable in my skin. Understanding that I am enough in the spaces that I've been called to be in and to show up authentically. I'm not, if you have asked me to be in the space, then you're going to get authentically who I am. I'm no longer, and I don't know if it is, once you cross into the 50s, and I'm like, this is who I am. That you are not going to get anybody else. So if this is not what you want, then I'm not the person.
I love it. I love it when you cross over into the 50s.
Yeah. The 50s. It's something happened. I'm like,
something happens, right? Something happens. So, what do you love about yourself?
You know what? I love the fact that I call myself a creative. I think it's just the way that I'm wired, that I honestly believe that if I don't know how to do something, I will find someone who can show me. And I'm not going to say no to something out of fear. I'm going to, if it was brought to me, I will identify what I need to do. And I've got the creative juices to get it done.
Okay, great. So we're going to rush through this a little bit because I want to get these questions to you. As you reflect on your greatest challenge, what does it reveal about your future?
Oh, that I need to be ready to continue to say yes.
That's good. That's good. I love that. Be ready to continue to always say yes. What strengths were you able to cultivate as a result of your experiences? Is there anything you would have done differently?
The very opposite. Know when to say no. And that no is okay.
Yes. My Bishop Yvette Flunder says, no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
Right. And ever since she said that, I've been living that out. What is your superpower?
Oh, my superpower. Oh, that's difficult. I think it is relationships. Even in some of the hardest in spaces, it has been that I can relate and be relational.
I can see that about you. Yes, indeed. So, how does faith play an intricate role in what you do?
I believe that my second book, Fearless Conversations with a Limitless God, I honestly believe that I am able to do anything He has given me. I'm not fearless in my own space, but because the God that I serve is bigger than any problem that's in front of me, I can be fearless because He's got me.
Yes, you are absolutely right. So I'm going to say 3 words. Just give me, a quick response to it, however you want to respond to it. Purpose
is not somewhere out there, it's right in front of you.
Passion.
Create as many yes spaces so that you do not waste any more time.
And priority.
Use time as currency.
Use time as currency. I love that. Priority. Use time as currency. Well, listen, that's the end of our show. It's been great. And I want to leave you with the last word, and then we're going to do some announcements. Well, we're not going to do any announcements. We're going to talk about how we're going to come back in the fall. But if anybody has a quick question that we have a couple of minutes, we can ask. If you have any questions out there, listen, Dr. Veirdre Jackson, you are an awesome wonder. And I love you. I literally love you. And so can you share anything you want to say around this segment, outside of this segment, for the people? Take it.
I'm in a space right now where I am not afraid to share because I believe what's for me is for me. And if there's someone today who's listening who has been afraid because they feel like they're going to miss something, if you continue to focus on adding value, what's for you is for you. You won't miss it. Lean into every opportunity and say yes.
Yes. Lean in every opportunity and say yes. And see opportunity as a blessing and not as a threat. Listen, that is our show. That is our season. This is our season finale. I've already seen responses where people are loving this. And so we've been on LinkedIn. We've been on Facebook Live. We've been on my professional page and my personal page. And we've been on YouTube. And next season, we'll add other platforms, Twitter and some other ones. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Veirdre Jackson, for doing this. Thank you for the work that you do. I mean, I saw you. It wasn't last year. It was 2 years ago, right?
No, I think it was last year.
Okay, it was last year that I went to it. Yeah. And so amazing. I went there, just needed some downtime and looked the sister up and said, let me go to this retreat. And I'm telling you, I was blown away with her presentation and just her giftedness and her personality. We clicked. And so I am so grateful for the work that you do. She has a radio station called Flipside.
Flipside of Adversity.
Flipside of Adversity. I love it. And you co-host that with another brother, right?
Yes, Pastor Keith Pelzer.
Yes, and I enjoy it. And I enjoy it when I do get an opportunity to see it. And so this has been an amazing season. We have had some extraordinary people on here. And this segment, season 4, is evolutionizing my greatness. We will continue in season 5 with evolutionizing my greatness with more leaders, right? But we're probably going to focus in the arena of faith and churches, right? Because that seems to be the big thing right now. And so stay tuned for what's going to happen with Leadership on the Go in the fall. We are taking a break. Is it okay for Victoria Burson to take a break? We're taking a couple of months, 2.5 months off for some much needed rest. And so I just want to say thank you to my listeners and my viewers for watching and being a part of the segment. Thank you, Dr. Veirdre Jackson. I would like to bring Elder Dorothy back on, please. I need the world to know about this woman and how much I love her. She has literally sat, except for a couple of the shows, but in season 4, she has literally been there. If anything happens, as you saw tonight, storm hit my internet, and she was there to take. She has literally sat in this brave space of doing my show with me, even behind the scenes. And can I tell you, she's an elder, she's a pastor, she's a professor, she's a leader, she's a dean, right? And she's also working on her bishopric. So I am just honored that you would take this time away from family and your own time to do this show with me twice a month. I love you so much. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is real friendship, right? Because she's behind the scenes, y'all. She's behind the platform and she sits there diligently. And there's been times she hasn't had to show her face. But I also want to give a shout out to OG, original, is not original gangster, but is only greatness. And so we just thank God for Crystal Glenn for the work she's been doing behind the scenes. She is moving on to greater things. And so we will be, she will be thoroughly missed. And we will just do what we have to do going forward. So thank you. Stay tuned for some great work that's coming forth. Stay tuned for Mind Over Matter. I know I've been telling you from the beginning of the year, but you know, when it's time to do it, I'll do it. I won't rush it. When it's time to do it, I'll do it. So thank you. Thank you again for being present. Thank you for those who are watching tonight and sharing. And thank you for following us via YouTube, Facebook, and what did I say? LinkedIn. So thank you so much. God bless you. Have a good evening.